Hey everybody, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2023 Chevy Trailblazer, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster towed vehicle battery charge line kit. Before we do that though, let's take a minute, check this out and talk about why it's a good idea to use one of these. A charge line is something that I recommend not only for the Trailblazer, but for every single flat tow that I set up. And the reason being, whenever you're flat towing your vehicle, the battery can get depleted. And that's because in some cases the vehicles use the battery power when they're getting flat towed, but in all cases essentially your supplemental braking system is going to use battery power whenever it operates. And so every time you hit the brakes, your supplemental braking system will operate, take a little bit of power, a little bit of power. Well, that adds up over 6, 8, 10 hours of driving, right? And so once you get to where you're going, that could potentially leave you with a flat battery. Not to mention, a lot of these newer vehicles now, all the electronics are so sensitive. It's just a good idea to keep your battery topped off and fully charged. And essentially that's what this kit is going to do. So whenever you're flat towing down the road, the kit is going to use your motorhome's auxiliary power. So the 7-way on it has 12 volts there. For reasons like this, it will send that power back and essentially trickle charge or maintain your battery. That way all your systems will operate properly, and once you get to where you're going, you'll have the confidence knowing that you can start the vehicle up without any issues. It's a really simple concept on how this is going to work and the job that it does. There are a couple other kits available. You have one made by Demco and then also one made by Brake Buddy. And they're all going to work, all do a good job. We've done a ton of these Roadmaster ones. Rarely ever run into any issues with them, if at all, from at least from what I can remember. Personally, I'm a little partial to the Demco one, and that's because it uses a fuse as opposed to a circuit breaker. So if an issue were to occur, it'd pop that fuse and cut power. As to where this circuit breaker, it'll trip, cool down, and then turn back on. So that's one of the things. And that Demco one also uses a diode in there, which prevents backfeeding, so you won't have battery power at your connector at the front of the vehicle, and that just helps with helps prevent corrosion and stuff a little bit better. But those are kind of just some small things that I thought I'd point out. And like I said, regardless of what kit you get, they're all going to get the job done and keep your battery in good shape. So at the end of the day, it's a no-brainer to run one of these. It's definitely cheap insurance, knowing that your battery is going to stay in good shape. And this is one of the parts here I feel like a lot of people kind of forget about. But it's really important, to use one of these, at least in my opinion. Aside from that, as far as getting this installed goes, really nothing to it. Definitely recommend doing this at the same time that you're doing the rest of your flat tow setup, and you can kind of run all your wires and everything at the same time, but you can definitely add this on later if need be. Wire goes to the battery, to a breaker, down to the front. So really not too much there and shouldn't really give you too many issues, but why don't we go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation for our charge line, you're going to want to first start by routing your power wire. So, our fascia's off the vehicle, and that's because we're doing this at the same time that we did our base plate, which is what I recommend, as well as doing it at the same time as your diode wiring, because we're going to be working on the same area. But took our one end of our wire, dropped it down through the front of our vehicle. Comes out there, and everything's loosely routed now. Eventually it will come back and get everything buttoned up, but have it coming over here. It's where I ran our red wire through our dust cover, and this is actually going to get hooked up to the back of our connector plug there. At the end of our wire here, you're going to want to strip that insulation back about like that and give it a good twist to get all the strands tight together. And this is going to get hooked up to that middle terminal there in our 6-way. So back the set screw out, almost all the way. Take your wire, Place it into the terminal, and then tighten that set screw back down. With everything hooked up here now, you can take your dust cover, put that over it. What I usually do is come back with some silicone and fill all this in to help prevent corrosion, but I wait until we verify everything's working, because if we have to come back in here, I don't want to deal with a huge mess. So this is just temporary. And get that covered up. And then I will mount this up to our base plate here. So our wire, you know, we got it routed up from where we dropped it down, and you're gonna need to find a spot to mount up the circuit breaker. And ideally you want this somewhat close to the battery, that way majority of the circuit will be protected. So this is where I mounted up ours. Just 2 self-tapping screws that comes with it, secure it down. Then you got these nuts on there. We'll go ahead and get them removed and out of the way. We're able to cut our wire to length now, so our wire from our 6-way connector is going to get hooked up to the gold post, and this post is labeled battery, so it might seem opposite, but and how this is going to be set up, the motor home is actually going to act as a battery, so that's why it's going there. So we'll eyeball it, cut it to length, we'll strip it back just like how we did earlier. And then you can grab one of the small terminals, slide that over, crimp it down. That's how we're going to make all of our connections here. Get that crimped down good. And then this slides over that post. And get the nut back on. We can then tighten it down with a 3/8 socket. So I took the remaining portion of our wire that we cut the length, and one end I crimped on a small terminal and attached it to the silver post, same exact way we did our one below it. And then on the other end of our wire, I crimped on the larger ring terminal that comes with it. And this is going to get hooked up to the positive terminal on our battery. So the batteries are right here. And, you know, I took our cover off there to make it easier to work with. But we can get this hooked up to our post now. And so a lot of times this nut here, it's a 10mm, isn't going to come completely off. They're kind of designed to stay that way. That way if you change the battery, you don't lose it. And this is probably the case with this one as well. And you'll know it just kind of stops, which it did. We're not going to force that off. What we're going to do instead is take our ring terminal, cut an opening in it, and then I kind of like to make this a little bit smaller even. We want the opening to be big enough to what we can do is slide it underneath the underneath that nut there. Once you have it in place, you come back and tighten it down. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster towed vehicle battery charge line kit on our 2023 Chevrolet Trailblazer.